when we were interviewing, I think I said something to you like, I'm not a good manager.
Mhm.
Is that, what do you recall what I said?
I actually remember hearing that 3 times.
Okay.
Once during the very first interview, another time shortly after being hired, and then another in conversation with a member. And yes, it was the first time you said it, you said, I won't be managing you. The next time you said, I'm not a good manager. And I think you said again, I'm not a good manager.
Yeah.
The third time.
Okay.
Yeah.
How was that received?
Well, to hear I won't be managing you was exciting.
I will often say I'm a leader, not a manager.
I was going to say the same thing. I think it's actually more important to lead than it is to manage in that
Yeah,
position. Mhm.
exactly. Yeah. And I define leadership as listening and lifting.
Nice.
That's my definition of leadership. Nice and simple. So
And I would say it's the first time I've heard you say that. And I will just say, I can verify I experienced that from you. So that's good.
cool. Awesome. Yes. Okay. So let's have this conversation. Maybe somebody who's watching this is a manager or someone who manages people. I just don't like that word, maybe to begin with, you know what I mean? Like it just feels controlling to me. So maybe you can talk about your experience in the past in folks that you've worked for. We'll just say leaders that you've worked for in the past, and just what you see in the experience here and how it's different, because I'm too close to it. Like I look at it and I go, this is just me. This is how I operate, right? But apparently it's working okay.
It's working very okay. And I have reflected on it to wonder, is the reason it works because of your approach and the way I approach things as well? Is it just a great combination, or are there some things here that we can pull out and share with the rest of the world? There are some things we all want to feel as human beings that completely are not left out in the workspace. We want to be heard. We want to feel valued. We want to bring exciting ideas in. We want to have creative space. We want to have safe space for that creativity as well. And just knowing that someone has your back at the end of the day and that support. I'd say those are basic things that we can all imagine wanting in the workspace. And I think one of my greatest areas of resistance in the past has been, I have a ton of ideas and a lot of willpower, we'll say, to try to make those things happen. But the structures or systems or support was missing, or that the system wasn't good for that particular idea, or the structure isn't set up to deviate from what we've always done. And the support might be like, hey, that's a great idea, but right. And you can only be kind of gently let down so many times before you're like, either one, I'm going to figure out a way to do this on my own, which is usually what I did, or two, I'm going to stop asking and check out, which at some point I also did. But more often my first strategy was to become overly ambitious and just say, fine, I'll do it by myself. I'm going to take it on. And it is extra, and it is more than is what is being required of me. And I would think through all of the logistics, the way to make things work. I would imagine what wasn't going to work and create this whole plan or program or event, whatever that thing was, and then say, here's an idea, and lay it out. And a few times I did get to execute those things, and that was really exciting to see them. But there was never an opportunity for, let's see how we can integrate that and do it again. And so the effort was just like, yay, I did it. But then it was like, for what? Like that was a nice experience for me. It was valued in the time, but then it wasn't valuable enough for them to follow up on. And I think that follow-up is also important. But what happens over time is I did get to a position where I stopped creating new ideas. I stopped coming to the table, which meant also what started to suffer was my problem solving skills in general, my frustration at work, because I wasn't able to feed myself creatively.
Yeah.
I didn't really want to do the cog in the wheel thing.
Yeah.
I remember throwing up my hands one time and just leaning back and saying, what am I doing here? And I had two managers at the time. Director, manager, coordinator was my position. And the manager, so the middleman, said, we're here to make sure that the machine works because there's important work to do. Ooh. And I said,
that's the wrong thing to say to anybody, but especially a millennial. No,
yeah. So I thought, okay, I can connect to the bigger picture of why, but I still am not like, that's not for me. That's not my space. Like, this is too much. This isn't working. And, you know, there's also seasonal change and lots of things that come into it. And I think at the end of the day, I would want managers to hear, like, you're working with people and you're not managing people, and you certainly shouldn't be controlling their results, right? If you take the leadership perspective, I think there's a lot more space and opportunity. Bringing your humanity to your job as a manager is always going to be well received, because I see your mistakes, or I see your quirks, or I see the places where you're trying to grow and learn. And so as an employee, I'm more willing to say, hey, I think I messed up, or I need some help. How would you get through this if you were me? One of the things I liked from a manager that I did not have a good relationship with was she was always asking me my opinion. What would you do about this? What would you do if you were in my situation? And I actually really liked that because it was very stimulating. I got to think outside the box. I felt like my opinions mattered to her. I also, over time, started to realize that I was expending a lot of energy during those conversations, and she was not as confident as she could have and should have been, in my opinion. And so I was like, oh, I'm feeding you. I'm not feeding us.
Got it.
And I think there's a relationship there that's really important. And the more we can kind of tap into some transparency, some honesty around that, you're going to have a much more successful managerial style or leadership, essentially.
One phrase you've said is has your back, right? Like knowing somebody who, you know, really has your back. What is that? Will you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. I'll give you an example of a time that I felt like someone didn't have my back, and a time where I definitely did. So I had a phone call with a client in a previous work experience, and the client was very upset and yelling very loudly for, minutes at a time. And I very calmly said, I'm sorry, I'd like to find a solution. Can you give me some time to go find an answer? And this person, the client, and personally started insulting me. And I was just like, okay, I don't know how to deal with this situation. I didn't know what to do. I actually hung up the phone.
Yeah.
So then I went immediately to my supervisor, really stressed out, and just said, I don't know what to do. I just had this conversation. This person was attacking me. I hung up on them. And that is when I got cut off. And they said, you hung up on a client? And I said, yeah, I didn't know what to do. And I panicked, and they were verbally accosting me. And these are the things they said. And I remember the parts that weren't the parts that you can let go of. People insulting you is not about you. It's about them. Sure. The parts that I remember that were hurtful still was like, you clearly don't know what you're doing. You're not good at your job. I guess you don't understand this industry. Right. So that language stuck with me. I remember that. And then my supervisor focusing on the fact that I'd hung up the phone felt like it had validated that. Yeah. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I would like to fix this. Help me find a solution. Yeah. And instead they said, I'll handle it. They took it away instead of letting me go back in and fixing the situation. And I know for some people, they're like, great, I would love to have a boss who just did my work for me. Yeah. That was not what I wanted or needed in that situation. I would have loved to go back in and find a diplomatic way to solve that problem, to readdress that person, to say, hey, I'm sorry I got off the phone very quickly. I went and found a solution. Clearly you're upset. Here's what I'd like to address. Here's what's going to happen in the future. And that's a natural state for me. And that wasn't being recognized by the client. I wasn't able to show it to myself. And I didn't get the support from my supervisor. They saw this as a failure. And there was no opportunity for learning or growth. So I had to go do that learning and growth on my own. Well, if you're an employee who doesn't just want to go and do that learning and growth on your own, you're going to be upset a lot and often. And I did feel very unsupported. And that feeling stayed. I became bitter. And so every time there was an issue, I felt like they were not on my team. They were not on my side. They didn't have my best interest in mind. They wanted me to do it perfectly or the right way. So their reaction to my reaction to someone else's reaction, like someone's got to stop, you know, push stop and just say, okay, hang on, let's reset, you know. A situation where I felt very supported was, you know, hey, what would you do in that situation? Give it a shot, have the phone call. Let's talk about it. I'm talking to a client and saying, hey, here's what we planned. Here's what happened. I'm sorry, I have to deliver some bad news. I hope that this is okay. How would you like to proceed? Here are two options.
Yeah.
And they did not want one of those two options. And prior to getting to this point, there were clear boundaries set. There was a lot of communication. It was something that had been given a lot of time and attention. And it was the two solutions that had, you know, me and my boss had come up with were great solutions. So there wasn't a reason that this should have carried on the way it did, except that this person just really wanted to win and really didn't want their circumstances to change. And I got off the phone and said, let me look for, give me a minute, called my boss and said, I would really like to uphold the boundary that I set and say, I've given you two options. These are your two options, and feel that power. Yeah. And immediately the response was, yes, go do that. You set a boundary. That's fine. You're absolutely right. And here's why, and here's what I would do. And that's a totally different feeling than the previous one. And a much more successful outcome, because I felt stronger in setting boundaries in the first place, knowing that I'd done the right thing along the way, feeling comfortable asking for help, being willing to ask for help again in the future. The transparency around it was refreshing. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like, oh, I have to solve this problem because now the client's upset and my boss is going to be upset and I'm disappointed because it didn't work out. Yeah. None of that existed. It was like, hey, we're trying to do the right thing. We hope it works out for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great example. Awesome. I love it.
When was you?
I was wondering, I'm like, that sounds familiar. Got it. Okay. I'd love feedback on our monthly growth check-in. It's a template that I came up with a few years ago, and I promote it to a lot of folks, like when I teach, like for my growth program and things of that nature. How has that worked for you, and what else could be added to that to make it even better?
Oh yeah, good questions. I would say that with this much, this isn't just blowing smoke, this is my honest feeling. With this much job satisfaction, it's hard for me to come up with things that could change to make it like even more better. I'm sure there are things, I'm sure that I can come up with some over time. I'm just accustomed to a very different work environment that doesn't feel great, right? So it's not just that I'm in a good position, it's that the deficit of support prior was huge. The growth meetings that we have are one of my favorite things about working here. I have shared it with many people in conversation, not the actual template. I didn't think about doing that, but just saying like, yeah, I don't have quarterly or, every 6 months or annual reviews, because we all know that annual reviews are annoying. Mm-hmm. It's like once a year I get to talk about something that maybe means like someone's going to give me more money. Like, how is that helping anybody? Yeah. And in a year, so much happens that you can't remember every detail. So you and I meet once a month and we focus on growth, and we don't just look at, well, Felena would really like Melissa to achieve these numbers. So Melissa, how are you going to do that? It's like, Melissa, you lead the conversation. What's important to you right now? What's working for you this month? What are you exploring or trying? How can I support that? What are some things that you have feedback on? What are you the most proud of? It really gives the opportunity to control the conversation, which means I'm also not going in with this nervousness, like I'm in trouble or I'm reporting to mom or, the boss is out to get me. It's really about reflecting and sharing. So it's accountability for reflection, which is to me very important. And then the being able to share that is nice because it's not just me going, here's what I wrote and here's what I wrote. Like, you're like, hang on, let's go into that. Can you tell me more about that? And I see growth in our conversations as well. The amount of time that we talk, the ease with the conversations, things like this come out of the conversations where we get to connect on another level about a different thing. We've talked about confidence, anxiety, all kinds of stuff. And that's great. It's like having a conversation with your friend and finding out like there's more you get to talk about next time. And it's in this professional setting that's about growing us as people and growing our positions. There's a lot of great tabs and tools in the template that kind of gives you a big picture. What are your strategies? What do you want to do? What are your goals? What are the actions within those goals?
My model of a business is an inverse triangle. A lot of times you'll see just a regular triangle, but mine is inverse in that I'm at the very bottom of the triangle and my job is to support everything above. So support my core team, support our licensees, support our members, support the broader community. And I'm at the bottom of the inverse triangle. And with that, when I imagine you and your role, I feel like my job is to help you lead, right? Mm-hmm. It's to lead, but even more so be that bottom of the pyramid so you can lead and continue to explore who you are and find that thought leadership position and the unique things that make you unique so you can share those with our community and in turn support them.
Yes. While I came in excited and believing in myself and feeling confident and then going, wow, this is a lot. This is exciting, right? Here we go. Each of those opportunities, I felt supported. I felt uplifted. And so I charged forward. I wasn't like, oh, am I the person for this? Should I be doing this? And I don't mean the job. I mean the individual things that came up, those risky moments, leading something that I hadn't led before for the first time, planning a 10-year anniversary party. I was like, can I plan the party? I don't know why I said that out loud. I would like to plan the party. You just said that. And you were like, sure. I was like, okay. And it was great. And you were like, so how's that going? And I was like, it's a lot. You're like, invite the members in, inspire them. And I really feel that. I'm a part of the community.
Yes.
And I help them find each other and they've got me too. And it's a really great feeling. So you're being a leader, you're giving me the opportunity to lead. And I feel grateful that I get to run with it. Now, if 30 to 50% of your employees are leaving, something really interesting is happening. And maybe that's in the hiring process or the business culture. But I would ask, how many of those employees do you know? What do you know about them? What is the chain of the operation for knowing those people? Is it just a report? Are they just a number? I would ask some of those kinds of questions. I would ask. I don't know that I would say specifically, go do this thing.
Yeah.
I would start asking some diagnostic questions around the relationship to those employees. or to the managers who then are dealing with that larger number of employees as well. I think that large companies tend to focus on their perks and say, we'll just buy them lunch, we'll buy them alcohol. There's only so much food and drink that you can have. It doesn't make up for feeling valued in a company. Or, bonuses or pay increases. Those are negotiations. That still isn't saying anything about who I am, right? I can negotiate higher or lower, and I can attach my worth to it or not. But I think the more attention someone can put into the fact that they're working with human beings, they can access that first through, I would say start there. Like, what is your level of people skills? Use that power. And if it's not you, find the person in your company that does have that power and use them. Some people they want to work in spreadsheets. They don't want to deal with the people. They want to look at results. They don't want to have fluffy conversations. They don't want to even ask you how you are. Find the person in your company who can ask those questions, because at the end of the day, I read a stat. It would be fun to find, but I didn't find it before this. The number of people that leave because of their relationships with their managers, they leave jobs because of that. It's really high. Every company that I have left, it was one of the things that I considered. And it was a really deep reflection. And like, what do I want out of a manager? It was always part of the conversation for me. That's not to say that every manager I've had has been awful or every manager I've had has been great. I'm just saying it was always part of what I considered when I wondered if I should stay at a job or not. Things take time, right? It takes time for things like communication, expectations, and trust to be addressed.
Well, and you bring up a good point that perhaps I should do, but also could be a tool for others. The monthly growth meeting and the 3 simple questions, what do you want to celebrate? What do you need to focus on this month? And how can I support you? That can be a 2-way street, right? Like, I could be sharing those things with you as well.
Let's try that in February.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. Right, where it does, that's why I keep going back to this, like, co-create, co-lead, sort of mentality, because I think that makes the best relationships in general, and in our personal lives and in work as well. And it just goes back to this, the hierarchy is just, it's so old, right? Like, it needs to go away altogether.
Well, and the hard thing is that takes a mindset shift, but there's a major cultural swing in there. But I do think we will get through this. I don't think it's impossible, but I a little bit understand there are a lot of people that were told that's the way it works. They bought in, they grinned and bared it. They got gritty. They put their head down. They were ambitious. They get to a point where they, feel successful, or they are successful, however they measure that, because they played by the rules. Now someone's going to go and change the rules. That can be really disheartening, right? Or make us feel better. And I would say it's a great time for reflection. And it's a great opportunity to say, oh, there are other ways to do that. How innovative, right?
And easy to do in a small environment like ours, much harder to do, with 1,000 employees or 100,000 employees.
To speak to employees out there who might feel like they don't have a manager that's supportive, I would reflect on a few things, which in real time, when I was experiencing this, I did not like this advice. So I know that it's like hard to swallow. But it was helpful. Now it was helpful. What kind of manager would I be? Use this as a learning, right? Like, take it in and understand it. Doesn't mean you need to stay in that situation. Doesn't mean there isn't more action you could take, but really start to identify, how would you do that job differently? And also, where can you be empathetic and compassionate? Doesn't mean that you have to let them off the hook for something that's inappropriate or frustrating or feels unsupportive. But that kind of reflection, once we get into those positions, we can really step into a different role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great advice.
Yeah.
Not easy to do. You're right.
No, not easy to do at all, because you're in it and it hurts and you just want to complain because you have no control.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or
I
it
could see
feels
that.
like you have no control.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Love it. Okay. Well, to be continued.
To be continued.
All right.